Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today I wanted to talk about Red Mage, a job that I was totally in love with back when it came out in Stormblood, but then as the expansion kind of progressed over time, I ended up switching to mainly playing tank for most of the raiding stuff, and I didn't really play it that much until a few weeks ago, because for the new raid tier I ended up playing Red Mage. Now the main reason why I ended up playing Red Mage and not something like a Summoner is because they got some buffs in 5.2. I told myself I like Summoner, I like Red Mage, but if I had to choose in between one of those, I would prefer to play Red Mage for progression's sake, because it is that raise mage. Red Mage can save groups from dying so much easier than something like a Summoner could, for example. So that's why the main reason that I wanted to play it for progression. Now, of course, even though Red Mage got some pretty decent buffs when it comes to dealing damage, it's still nowhere close to the amount of damage that a Summoner can put out. But on the other hand, Summoner is nowhere close to the level that Red Mage is when it comes to saving your party. So if you look at those kind of things, I do think that Red Mage's lower personal DPS is justified compared to like how much utility that it does bring to the party. But today we're not going to talk about potency and DPS wise kind of stuff. We're going to talk about Red Mage itself as a job, because job design wise, I think Red Mage is one of the best designed jobs in the game right now. You have this really cool dual casting feature where you are basically, every time that you cast a spell, the next one will be instant, and this works of course for your resurrection ability as well, which is why Red Mage kind of has that raise mage image attached to itself. But the way how it actually works with your rotation is you have a few spells that are very fast to cast, which is around, I believe it's 2.20 seconds or something like that. And you have a few skills that are very slow to cast, around 4.5-5 seconds. So what you do is you use a fast spell that will then proc the dual cast, and then you use that dual cast proc, or buff I guess you could call it, on that slower spell, and you kind of alternate in between all of that. And then of course your two slow casting spells also have a 50% chance to proc a buff as well, which will then allow you to replace Jolt with either of the specific mana like spells. So you have Jolt, which is your basic, I have no procs, I need to proc dual cast. Then you have Arrow and Thunder, which are your slow casting spells that give you a big chunk of their specific white and black mana. And then both of those can proc either Stone or Fire, which then again kind of replace Jolt because they do more damage, and they also give you a bigger mana increase to your black and white mana gauge respectively. So it's really fun in between switching all of those, managing your procs and that kind of stuff, and also making sure that you balance your black and white mana gauge as you are building it up to 80-80, because once you reach that 80-80 stage, that's where you can get close to the boss, do a full melee or fully enhanced melee combo, and then backflip out and do your two finishers in either Verholy, Verflare into Scourge as well, which is a new addition that we had going into Shadowbringers. Now, back when I look at it from Stormblood, Red Mage was pretty fun to play, but the only aspect of it that was annoying was the backflip. When you look at it from a, how should I call it, like a roleplay perspective, you're basically standing in the back, you're being a caster, you're casting all of your spells. Once you reach that 80-80 mana on your mana gauge, you're getting close with your gap closer, you do your melee combo, you backflip out, you do your finishers, and you're done. Looks really cool, looks really flashy. But when it comes down to the actual gameplay standpoint, those gap closer and backflip, they both have damage attached to them, and because of that you want to try to use them on cooldown as much as possible. Now, your gap closer isn't necessarily a problem. The only time that you can't really use this is when the boss, for example, is doing an AoE around them or something like that, that makes it so that you can't be in melee range. Now, when it comes to your backflip, however, you can't really use that all the time on cooldown because of a few reasons. First of all, maybe you just can't backflip away from the boss without flying out of the arena. Doesn't happen that often to me anymore, but for this raid progression during Shiva, I'm pretty sure I backflipped off the map once or twice. So that's one reason. Second reason, you might want to stay close to the boss to get certain healing. For example, I procced with an Astro, what's it called, Earthly Star, that's placed around the boss usually to also hit all the melees and the tanks. So when that star is about to go off, I need to make sure that I stay close so that I don't die. Certain other mechanics that maybe need to be placed close to the boss or that need to be placed in a certain position, you can't necessarily always backflip when you want to, is what I'm trying to say basically. Now, going into Shadowbringers, we basically have a kind of weaker alternative to this backflip, but it also opens up a lot of other possibilities for us. First of all, the new Backflip. Backflip is called Displacement. The new one is called Engagement. And what it basically does is it allows you to backflip on the spot. And this means that now, instead of being animation locked in this big backflipping animation, you now actually have the room to double weave, because the backflip displacement can't be dual weaved, and engagement, the one that you use on the spot, can be dual weaved. So that's one of the good options to it. The other aspect is that it basically makes it so that when you wouldn't have the opportunity to backflip because mechanics, because you're in the middle of your melee combo or something like that, or for some other reasons, then you can basically still use that skill and get it on cooldown again, so that maybe the next time you use it, you can still use that backflip, just to make sure that you don't lose usages. Because if you just hold on to your backflip for too long because you can't use it for certain reasons, then eventually you're just going to lose an extra usage because of manification, which will reset the cooldown of that thing as well. So that's why I think engagement is a really cool addition to Red Mage. Other than that, we also have a little bit of a more interesting, I guess you could call it, AoE combo. Back in Stormblood it was just basically one button that you would spam, and now you do have a white and a black mana alternative, with then of course also a long casting spell. So you have 3 buttons now for your AoE rather than just one button that you would spam, which is pretty good. And then when it comes to your combo finishers, we also now have Scorch as like a add-on finisher, I guess you could call it. Right now you have a melee combo that then goes into either Verflare or Verholy, and then that combos into Scorch, which then kind of kickstarts your mana gauge again, going towards the next melee combo. So I think it's a pretty cool addition to that system as well, although it does take a little bit of getting used to now all of a sudden have that extra combo that you have to press, or that extra button that you have to press after you finish that burst phase. Now, when it comes down to its burst phase, Red Mage does feel a little bit weird at the moment, and not necessarily the way I would like it to be. So when we look at our raid buffs and our personal buff, we have Manification, which grants us a personal damage buff, and we have Embolden, which is basically our raid buff. It does grant us a personal damage buff as well, but it also grants the raid a damage buff. Now, the annoying thing about Embolden, and which I also think is actually kind of cool about it, is that Embolden is only for physical damage dealers. So it doesn't affect other casters, doesn't affect your healers, but it does affect your tanks, your melees, and your ranged physical DPS dealers. So that makes it so that Red Mage wants to be paired up in a solo caster environment, I guess you could call it. If you want to run double caster, you take Summoner and Black Mage. You don't take a Red Mage, because Red Mage is not going to be buffing those casters. So it makes it kind of cool when you look at it from a team building perspective. Although most people do still run single caster, unfortunately enough. I would like some more people to experiment with other team comps, but that's just my ideal world. But basically, Red Mage wants to be paired up with other physical damage dealers, which is kind of cool. But on the other hand, when you look at it from Red Mage's personal damage perspective, it doesn't really make any sense to me. So what we have now is we have Embolden, which is on 120 seconds, 2 minutes. And we have Manification, our own personal damage buff, which is on 110 seconds. Now, the thing about Manification is that it also increases your mana gauges by double, so you need to make sure you have 40-40, you use Manification, and bam, you can do your melee combo. But it also resets your engagement, or displacement, and your Cora Core, your gap closer. So you want to be using Manification on cooldown, essentially, to make sure that you get the maximum amount of usages out of it, because if you're going to be delaying it by 10 seconds every single time, like for example say Shiva's a very long fight, like 14 minutes or something like that, meaning that you get about 7 usages of your 2 minutes on there. So if you're going to be delaying it by 10 seconds every single time, then you're going to lose about 70 seconds in total. So it could mean that with a fast enough kill time, you're going to lose the usage overall. And it can also mean that you might, for example, not get these extra usages of Cora Core and displacement either. So in general, you want to be trying to use your Manification on cooldown. And because of that, your own personal burst phase is going to be pushed forward before the raid buffs go out, and it's going to make that happen faster and faster as the course of the fight goes on, because you're going to misalign your Manification further and further from that Embolden. So in my opinion, personally, I would just like to see it change that Manification also becomes 2 minutes, so that you can line it up with Embolden, and that would just make it for me feel a little bit better. But outside of this, I think that the Red Mage job is pretty well balanced around like its own playstyle right now. It still feels just as amazing to play as it did back in Stormblood, even more so now that you're not necessarily locked in needing to use that backflip, but that you also have the option to use engagement instead, to double weave, or to just stay close to the boss for healing, for mechanics, that kind of stuff. So for me personally, Red Mage, if you've ever thought about picking up a caster but you're not quite sure if the complexity of Summoner is for you, or if the buff management of Black Mage and basically being a turret for at least the majority of the time that you're leveling it, and you want to be a more mobile caster, a caster that still uses a lot of off-global cooldowns, but also still has that really cool gameplay aspect where you're dual casting, you're building up that mana gauge, and once you've built that up, you get close, you use that melee combo, you backflip out all stylishly, and then you use those cool looking combo finishers as well, then I think Red Mage is definitely going to be for you. It might be a very easy job to pick up, and because of that, some people or some friends that I know find it very boring because of that. But for me, there is a lot of optimization that you can do with the backflips, with your proc management, that kind of stuff, that still keep it very fun for me. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. That's pretty much my thoughts on Red Mage and how I think it's a very well designed job and a very fun one to play. Let me know what you think about Red Mage in the comments down below. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.